Ernest Troiano III. So my role during Superstorm Sandy, I was a firefighter, rank of firefighter. Due to the magnitude of the storm, additional personnel were brought in. We beefed up our staffing. We had different personnel assigned to different apparatus. We had an engine company staff, we had a ladder company staff, we had high water vehicles staffed for rescue operations. During Sandy, the city started an evacuation process. So prior to even going into our shift, several of us were detailed to transport families to shelters that were offshore. Woodbine, the Woodbine Developmental Center was one of them. They were actually filled. We ended up taking them to one of the Middle Township elementary schools. So living on a barrier island, the fire department is always in a state of readiness. We monitor the weather constantly. The Deputy Chief Dunn, is our OEM director. Very, very good at his job. He sends out the code reds, which is like a reverse 911 system to the residents that are signed up, which the city also encourages. So you get warnings of inclement weather, flood-prone areas are advised to move their vehicles. Being that we live on a barrier island, flooding is not anything new to us. So we know our target areas and our high hazard areas. So we staffed high water vehicles for evacuation and rescue operations. I did not. However, the storm tracked differently than it was originally projected. It tracked north a bit, and that's why Seaside and Lavalette and those areas got pounded. Had it tracked stayed on the original track, we would have been on the other side of the storm. And during the first tide cycle in the morning, I had water coming up to my bottom of my walkway. And I live in a very high area. We don't flood. And that was a bit concerning. I had to move everything up, elevate it, got my family out. And then, fortunately for us, not fortunate for others, but fortunate for us, it did track a bit north. We were on the other side of the storm with the wind directions were a bit different, so it didn't drive the flooding in as much, and it did not get into the house. But it was definitely a major concern. We did not experience any damage to the firehouse per se, and our vehicles were okay. The way we're set up is it's a last ditch effort to put any of our apparatus, our suppression apparatus, our engine, our ladder, in floodwaters. We have pumps on 5 tons for fire suppression in flood-prone areas. So the guys will go to higher ground, stage the apparatus there, get off, get on the 5-ton vehicle, and then proceed into the flood area. If we absolutely have to and we need more fire suppression capabilities, last-ditch effort, we will bring an apparatus down there. But the salt water destroys vehicles around here, so they're high dollar, and we're very cost conscious. But again, whatever we have to do, if there's life safety is an issue, we're going to do whatever we got to do to get there. Sandy was a big factor in, I believe they called them V zones. So they designated certain areas that are prone to flooding more than others, and they actually elevated, the building codes, your elevations. Like we used to be elevation 10 here. Well, they may have increased it to elevation 11 or elevation 12 to prevent the water from getting into your house. So as a result of Superstorm Sandy, building codes were changed quite a bit. We were pretty prepared. Again, living on an island that is prone to flooding, especially on our west side, we are prone to flooding. Therefore, we're always in a state of readiness. We have 5 tons that are ready to go for evacuation. We have 5 tons that are set up for suppression. We bring in additional manpower. We'll do a complete recall of the department to properly staff these apparatus so we can complete our mission, and that is to provide the highest level of service, whether it's rescuing people or evacuating people or fighting fires, providing EMS. The other thing is too, you get EMS calls back there. People who didn't evacuate, you can get an EMS call, so now you got to worry about transporting, getting back there, having access. You can't drive an ambulance back there; it'll get flooded. So again, we're using the 5 tons to gain access. Now we're providing patient care. Now we got to transport them depending on what the illness or injury is. We got to put them onto the 5 ton, get them out to the higher ground where the ambulance is, and then transport them once again, transfer them from there into the ambulance and take them to the hospital. Yeah, we constantly monitored, and we had staffing on to meet the requirement that we thought was needed to mitigate any situations. As the storm intensified, the on-duty captain requested a municipal recall, which brought everybody, all the career personnel. We also brought in volunteers the time that we had. We brought them back in. They staffed for storm duty. That was a bit different than Sandy because of obviously the time of year. So you had like chunks of ice and snow floating down, moving down the streets. And this isn't. It is tidal in a sense that it'll come in with the tide, stay in with the northeast wind, and then eventually go out with the tide. But when you're dealing with floodwaters, there's a lot of things you need to be concerned with. One, we have inflatable boats we call Zodiacs, right? So we'll take that out and we'll have a crew with that, and we're evacuating people out of their houses. The thing you need to be concerned with, because it's considered swift water, it does have a current. It moves very rapidly. We had people that were trying to move their cars, got caught up in it, got pulled under. We're able to get to safety and lead to, eventually relocate them and move them. But it doesn't take much to lift a sewer manhole cap. So as you're walking through these streets, you got to be mindful of the hazards, any holes or openings that are in the street that weren't originally there. So you need to probe and prod ahead of you. Very similar to a fire when you're sounding the floor or the roof. Same concept when you're walking the street. In the street, you need to probe and prod to make sure you don't walk into a hole that now you drop in this manhole. We did the same thing. We made sure our trucks were fueled up. We made sure that the equipment was stocked. We made sure that the pumps were running properly. We exercised our 5 tons with the pumps on them once a week. It's part of the apparatus maintenance and goes into a rotation. So we are constantly making sure that they're up and running and ready to go at a moment's notice. Any issues get reported through a software system we have. We have one individual who is responsible for fleet maintenance, so therefore he'll coordinate all efforts into repairing anything that needs to be repaired to make sure that our apparatus is operational and our equipment as a whole. The challenges were just the weather in general. I mean, the cold temperatures, the swift water, the amount of people that we had to evacuate. We did have several fire calls, emergency medical calls. I believe it was Superstorm Sandy that we actually couldn't even get off and on the island. That's probably the first time in my career that I remember the island as a whole being shut down, access to the floodwaters. Usually Wildwood Crest, if you go out the south end of the island, that's very high ground and tends to not flood, where North Wildwood could get flooded out. Wildwood used to get flooded out before they redid the road project and raised it like 3 feet. So that's eliminated. Plus they put a pump down there, so that's eliminated the flood problems. But what we would do is stage an ambulance on the other side of the bridge at the Wildwood Welcome Center. So the crew would be transported over by the crew on one of the 5 tons, our high water vehicles, and the patient would be loaded, and we would take them to the hospital, come back, call for the 5 ton. They would come over the bridge again, pick us up, and bring us back. So we're back in service. We did not have any loss of personnel, and we were lucky enough. I don't believe anybody sustained any kind of significant injuries. Nothing that was reportable. There's an evacuation plan, but like any plan, you can't force people to leave their homes. One of the issues we faced was Hurricane Irene. We were supposed to get smacked with Hurricane Irene. So there was a mandatory evacuation of the island. For instance, my family relocated and they went to a friend's house in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. Well, the storm kind of went up the Delaware and hit them worse. They lost power, they lost everything. We really didn't get hit nearly as bad. I mean, it was like a bad nor'easter. So the people that were left and found out it wasn't that bad, automatically the next time they don't want to be bothered. They're not leaving. Now, you told us the last time that we had to evacuate. It was going to be horrible. It was dangerous, so they stay. And then regardless of the amount of warnings you can give these people, and especially with social media, it's a great opportunity to push your message out to people, because everybody, doesn't matter, young, old, they're getting pretty good with social media. So it's a great outlet to send out a message, in addition to the Code Red or reverse 911 system that we have. But again, people who may have evacuated the first time and we ended up really getting nothing here, that was it. That was the worst thing that could have happened, because they were like, okay, well, here's the news, hyping it up again, and we didn't get anything. We went relocated, inconvenienced ourselves. Some people that did relocate ended up losing power and dealing with a really bad storm, and they just didn't move. So that left a lot of people behind that we had to rescue, that literally like water in their homes, in their units that they were staying. I mean, there's like probably a good foot, if not more, in some areas of water that these people are like sitting up on their beds or walking around this. Superstorm Sandy was not as cold, but Jonas was. So now the other concern we had to worry about is hypothermia. These people that were in their homes and they're walking around these ice cold waters, and now you relocate and bring them out in the elements. Hypothermia was an issue, so we would have a designated area on high ground where there was a bus, and we would transport these people out of the flood-prone areas up to this bus, and they would get relocated to a facility that was being managed by the Red Cross. I don't think so. Again, I think the fact that we're always in a state of readiness is very beneficial to us as a department, but to the citizens of this great city, because we're ready to go. No matter what it is, we're ready to answer the call. And that's the mentality we have. We operate under the philosophy of failure is not an option. It just simply isn't. You call us, we're coming. We'll go through hell to get to you. That's our job. So we stay ready with that mindset. We're always ready, or the best we can, for any situation that we may be faced with. So I think, again, the preparation was there. I think the warnings were there. It just comes down to people whether or not they want to listen to the warnings and evacuate, or not. And a lot of them, again, when you have a storm that gets hyped up and then nothing really comes of it, that is the worst thing that can happen for the people, because now they're going to look at the next storm the same way and not relocate or evacuate. And then now they're in a bad situation. And when they're calling us, it's usually way too late into the incident, and they're already flooded out, situations going on. The other issues we have to worry about when we go into these places, we always try and secure their power, because if you have outlets, obviously, in your house, and they're on the wall and they're low, and you have flood, water's getting in there, starts tripping, you could have an electrical fire. So when we go and we would evacuate them, we would also secure the power, gas, electric, whatever we could, to prevent, the place from catching fire as best we could. Because it's one thing having water damage, right? It's another thing having a fire in your place. Now, you get a fire in an area that is, 3-4 feet underwater, your response time's delayed, regardless of, you being at the ready, bringing in, using 5 tons to get there. There's going to be a slight delay. The weather is a factor. So we try and do everything we can to eliminate any secondary issues. I would say yes. I think those storms were a good message sender to the people that, number one, you're never going to beat Mother Nature, and to listen to the warnings. And there were several people that we did evacuate during Sandy that were actually telling us, that's okay, yeah, we understand, we're idiots, we should have listened, we should have left, and, they're kicking themselves. But I think we had that, and then we have Jonas, less than 3 years later, and I think people are aware of the effects that, what could happen here, and the effects to their livelihood and the repercussions of staying in their homes during a major storm like that. There's something going on. I'm not a scientist, but, you're starting to see these storms are more frequent. I believe they're more powerful, it seems like. The prime example is this spring. So what we're supposed to have is spring. I mean, it's May and it's nasty out. We've had a nor'easter that rolled in on Friday, and we still have high winds we're dealing with out of the northeast, and they're predicted to go till tomorrow, which is Thursday. So these storms that we're having, they seem to be more frequent and definitely more intense. So there's definitely, in my opinion, again, I'm not a scientist, but there's something going on with the climate. I do. Based on this recent history, I do. I mean, you'll see, oh, it's a 100-year storm. It's a 100-year storm. Well, the 100-year storm's coming with less than 3 years apart. Kind of makes you wonder. So I definitely think that they're going to continue to intensify. I believe so. I think, you know, a lot of what's going into the atmosphere, the things that are being burned, the things that are being used, and, you know, I'm not, I don't want to say 100% sold on global warming, that type thing per se, but there's definitely something going on. You know, I think development with technology and so on and so forth, I think a lot of that contributes to what's going on in the atmosphere, what we're pushing out, the things we're burning. You know, like, you know, LA, they talk about the smog all the time. I mean, that's not good for the atmosphere, right? Growing up, they always told us that aerosol cans or burn a hole in the ozone layer. You know, I mean, you heard these things. Well, that didn't stop people from using hair products, you know, and especially in the 80s when you had, you know, the high hair, the girls wore the high hair. I mean, that was, you could have broke bricks off that stuff from the amount of, you know, hairspray they used, but they were all aerosol cans. You know, that's what they told us. So I definitely think that human actions are impacting the environment. I mean, I think the sea level is rising. You know, you see that there's glaciers melting and all. I don't think it's, my opinion again, I don't think it's necessarily growing at the rate that they want us to believe it is, but I think it is happening. You look at history, I mean, we had the Ice Age, right? We no longer have the Ice Age. I think this could be just a natural occurrence, you know, we're one planet in an entire solar system. So it's crazy how a lot of this, you know, when you think about it, it's kind of out of our control. We don't know, right? We can do what we can from a human standpoint to not contribute to the factor, but we don't know. I mean, you had dinosaurs that roamed the earth. You had, you know, the Ice Age, that, you know, and then things changed, right? The climate changed. We see it here where, you know, now our seasons are changing, right? So we have, typically you get maybe the end of April, beginning of May, but start getting warm. Well, we're in May, and the weather is still pretty cold, right? We're in the 50s. Wind chills, you know, it's dropping down to 40s at night. We even had some, I think we're dropping in the 30s from here and there. So it seems like the weather gets warmer later, but the season's later. So you'll go into November now where you're still at warm temperatures. So it's almost like it's shifting. Just say that, you know, first of all, I think it's great what you're doing. You live on a barrier island. You understand what we're up against. It's important for you just as much as it's important for me as a fire chief to get a message out, right? If we know we're getting a bad storm, we all have the technology to be warned, correct? So if you know there's a bad storm and they're suggesting people, you know, they're telling people to evacuate, you're just as much responsible as I am to push the word out, right? Take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, make sure you don't ignore the signs. If they tell you, there's a reason why they're telling you. I can tell you from a local level, we're not trying to scare people, right? We're going off the most accurate information we can possibly find. We're in touch, being monitored by the, you know, the National Weather Service, right? It comes through the county OEM, comes through state OEM, which is Office of Emergency Management, right? We're getting real-time information from them and what's to be expected. So if the city officials are telling you that you need to evacuate, you need to evacuate. We're not going to inconvenience or relocate people that don't need to be relocated if we didn't think it was necessary. So you guys, I wouldn't take it light, right? Young people don't tend to understand the consequences, pretty carefree. We were all that way. The older you get, the more you experience, the more you get to know. You know, your thought process, your views on things tend to change. So, you know, in true warrior fashion, we're leaders, right? So if you get a warning, listen to it. Encourage others to do the same. That's the other thing is too. It's crazy. I think it was Sandy, county OEM director, was actually, they were doing press conferences, basically saying, like, threatening people that if you don't leave, there's no guarantee that your loved one, that you'll survive it. And they talked about toe tags, which they put on deceased bodies, which is kind of grim. But the point they were trying to get at was, don't take this lightly. Not only by you staying, you're putting the first responders in harm's way unnecessarily, but you're putting yourself and your family at risk. Again, we join police, fire, EMS. We do it because it's something we want to do. You're, as the civilians, the community, you're our number one responsibility. You're number one, right? So we will do whatever we got to do to help somebody or save somebody. So, again, if they're telling you to evacuate, you should evacuate. Monitor the weather yourself. Look at it. We all have it on our phone, right? We have a weather app that comes on our phones. I don't know too many people that don't have cell phones in these days. A lot of people might not know how to use them, but they have them. And guess what? Any severe weather, is your phone ever going off? Have you ever gotten this alert on your phone that like literally scared the crap out of you? What? And you look down and it's some sort of weather warning? We have them. So don't ignore them. Again, I think it's great what you guys are doing. I think it's definitely something important that we need to look at. There's a reason why, these storms are intensifying and they're more frequent. I just, without being a scientist, I couldn't really tell you why, but I definitely think human factor plays a role to some degree.
That's all our questions.
That's it. Go Warriors.